Welcome back to the Pack and Clint show here on Total Coverage Sports. I'm Pack, that's Clint. Thank you all for joining us. Super excited for you guys to be here. We got a really good show for you guys today. We're going to very briefly talk about the games last week. We're pretty much just going to talk about Texas and Texas A&M, and then we'll talk about some of the new coaches that got announced on Sunday and yesterday. And then we'll break down all of the different conference championships. We'll talk the Big 12 championship game, the Big 10 conference championship game, and then the SEC championship game. So we've got a lot of different stuff we're going to be talking about today, and a lot of different things to discuss with you guys. We'll also very briefly, in a little bit, talk about the CFP playoff rankings, and we'll give our thoughts on that. We'll also mention what it means for Texas and their playoff hopes. So please do stick around for that. Before we get started with anything else, I got to ask Clint, how you doing?
Doing good, man. Great to get a win over A&M, obviously. Sweep our rivals for first time since 2 years in a row, I think since 69 to 70. I think that is the right years. But, yeah, it was a great weekend. Obviously, we'll get into the CFP rankings a little bit higher than I thought we'd be. But overall, doing good.
Yeah, so we can just start with the Texas and Texas A&M game, and then we'll talk about some of the playoff rankings and what it means for Texas. So I wasn't here last week, but I did give Clint a lot of my notes about this game. And I think the first thing that I wrote when I texted him my notes was, this is a game where wide zone's going to be super effective. I think I said something along those lines. And if you go and you watch that game, and if you go and look at the box score, I think Texas averaged something like 200 yards. I think they ended up with 200 yards when you adjust for sacks, and they averaged almost 7 yards per carry when you adjust for sacks. And a lot of that was based off of wide zone. Now, there was some duo in there and there was some inside zone, but predominantly for Texas, it was wide zone. And if you remember 2 weeks ago when we had Joshi on, and he mentioned that Mizzou might give Oklahoma some problems because of outside zone, I said it was because of the way that Oklahoma stunts their front, where they run a lot of different stunts and a lot of different twists and a lot of different games up front. Texas A&M is the exact same way. And what ended up happening was Texas was able to take advantage in the same way that they took advantage of OU stunting and twisting the front and doing all the stuff that they do. They took advantage of A&M for that exact same reason. And that's partially why I had picked and I told Clint that I was going to take Texas to win the game, because I thought this was a game where Texas was going to be able to run the ball because of the way that outside zone is really not great against teams that want to slant and stunt and run a bunch of games to create havoc up front. Those are really good against interior-based run games like inside zone, duo, gap scheme stuff like counter, power, but it's not great against outside zone when everything gets stretched out and you work yourself into blocks as a defense. So to me, that was the first point, and that's kind of why I picked Texas initially, and that obviously came to fruition. I think the more important thing and what really I think surprised me and why I had it being a close game was I didn't expect, and Texas proved me wrong, the secondary played really, really well. I thought there wasn't a whole lot of busted assignments. They did a really good job of being sticky. They forced Marcel Reed to have to play quarterback, and it wasn't being able to throw your first read and the receiver have no one within 5 yards of him. And those were things that I said Texas could not do, and they did not do that. They did a really good job of closing the space. They were aggressive. You saw some man coverage in there. You saw some Tampa 2. Even in cover 3, they were a lot more willing to play out of a press bail instead of off coverage. And I think that eliminated a lot of the free access throws that A&M needs in order to get Marcel Reed into a rhythm, because he's not a naturally accurate guy. And you can see this when you've watched him over the past 2 years. He sprays the ball, and he doesn't miss in one way. He'll miss wide and he'll miss high one time, he'll miss low another time, he'll put a ball behind someone by 5 yards, he'll throw it 2 yards ahead another time. He's just generally inaccurate. And when that's the case, being able to take away all sorts of rhythm from him is really, really important. Texas did that. And I think that's why you saw him struggle so much. He had one stretch after he got hurt where he was 7 for 7. But outside of that, it was a really, really ugly performance by Marcel Reed. And you have to give Texas a lot of credit for that. And then offensively, Arch Manning didn't play a great game, but he played a good game and he played well enough for Texas to win. And it was a really good win for Texas. That was kind of my main thoughts on the game, and I'll turn it over to Clint to let him go.
Yeah, so at the very beginning of the game, obviously you saw both teams. I think both teams got one first down and then had to punt. And then for the rest of that first quarter, you kind of saw it was just a defensive battle, three and out, 4 play drive, and then A&M ended up getting that blocked field goal, which then you started to see the offense pick up. Um, then on that first drive where we scored that field goal, you really saw Wisner start to really pick up the run game. I will say I wish we would have ran the ball more in that first half. I think that we had a good amount of success with the run game, but I think that Sark, I think he just wanted to stay with the pass game. I don't know why when we were having success there, but obviously wasn't getting the job done. And then I think when they got that touchdown and made it 10-3 right before half, I turned to my dad. We were at the game, and I told him I thought we were going to get our teeth kicked in. I'm not going to lie. I thought just because of how we were playing, and generally throughout the year, we have not been that great of a second half team, in my opinion. And A&M this whole year has been great in the second half. That's what they've kind of been known for, is they've been a lot better in that second half when it comes to offense, defense, just overall how they play. But to see us in that second half, um, after we got that 3 and out, and then we got that long Wisner run, got the field goal and stopped them, I thought we had a really good chance. You go down on 2nd and 12, Arch Manning gets that touchdown. I think that was the turning point, and then you just saw it start to unravel for A&M at that point, and we ended up just playing a lot better offensively. Like you said, Arch Manning didn't have a great game. He did have a good game, though. I think especially in that second half, he improved a lot more. Um, Wingo, I was a lot more impressed with his hands, even though he had that drop screen. To make that catch that he did for a touchdown, you don't really see him make any of those type of catches. You don't expect him to, because he's had so many problems with his hands this year. Defense wise, very impressed with the defense. I thought it was going to be there was going to be a lot more offense for A&M than there was. I think you did touch on this, that you started to see a little bit more man coverage in the second half. And I was so impressed with how the corners played on that. Cade Phillips played good. I think he went out middle of that game. Kobe Black, I was very impressed with how he played that game, and Muhammad, obviously, who's been amazing this year. And then also you saw in that second half, whenever Ty Anthony Smith came back, you really started to see that change in how the defense played. Because I think in the first half it was a lot of bend don't break like we've seen for most of the year with Pete Kwiatkowski. You saw that on the block field goal, the made field goal for A&M, and the touchdown drive, where it looked like their offense was starting to get a rhythm. But I think Anthony Smith coming back played a huge role in that, and us being able to stop them. And I'm just very impressed with the overall team performance. Wisner getting 150 something yards rushing, which first time this year we've had a running back get over 100 yards in a game. Which, if you've seen Sark's Texas teams since he's been here, that's kind of a wild stat to have for us. So very impressed with the game. DKR, that was probably the loudest I've ever heard it, and at every game I've been to there. Wasn't a record crowd, but the atmosphere, just the whole game, was amazing, and it was just a great day.
Yeah, and for A&M fans, I think the concerning thing is this is kind of what we've seen of Marcel Reed a lot this year is he's been very hot and cold. He was awful in the first half against South Carolina, and he was good in the second half. He still left some throws on tape and he missed some reads. But to me, I think the encapsulation of what went wrong for A&M is the very first play of the game for them. Marcel Reed leaves a clean pocket and he scrambles into Ethan Burke, and it turns into a 2 yard gain. But that's one of those things where if you let the play develop, there's two hitch routes that are open if he sees them. And he doesn't, and he leaves a very clean pocket to scramble upfield into a defensive edge. That's the type of stuff that concerns you against elite competition, which we know that A&M hasn't faced, right? They've played one team with a winning record in conference play, and it was Texas, and they scored, I think, 17 points, and the offense didn't look great. The defense was kind of what it's been all year. It's kind of what I've been saying. They can't stop the run consistently, and I think their corners can get beat vertically. Um, and I think it's always a problem when your safeties have to start getting involved in the run game and they have to be aggressive playing downhill in the run game the way that A&M's were. So to me, that's if there was a takeaway for A&M, it's just that. I think some of the concerns that I had early in the year really showed up. And I think it's not their fault because you can only play who's on your schedule, but it does concern you against really good teams what it's going to look like. Right now, they'd be scheduled to face Notre Dame, and this is a better Notre Dame offense. It's a better Notre Dame defense, and that's a matchup that can concern you because you don't know that A&M is going to be able to stop Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love, and Notre Dame's going to get Jaden Greathouse back, and Malachi Fields is playing really, really well for them, and Faison's really reliable. So you've got some concerns for any one of these matchups for A&M because they're likely going to play either Alabama or Notre Dame because they're not going to be any higher than 6. You would think they're probably going to be 7. So that's obviously a cause for concern for A&M in terms of their playoff seeding. Where if they were the 5 seed, you'd feel a lot more comfortable for them. But as the 7 seed, it gets really dicey for them.
Yeah, and just wanted to put one more note about the game. Even though Marcel didn't play a great game, I don't necessarily know if I'd blame the game on him because they will point to those 2 interceptions at the end, which I have the mentality that I'm not going to really put late game interceptions on quarterbacks too much because it's those situations where you're down by 2 scores. You have to get points quick. You have to make some risky throws. You have to take some risks to get points quick. You saw that with Arch against Florida, where we had to get a lot of points quick at the end, and he threw 2 interceptions. But yeah, I just want to say it wasn't on him. I do think it's interesting though how Pete Kwiatkowski throughout his whole time at Texas, anytime he's going against Colin Klein, he's been able to stop him pretty well. I would say other than that, I think that 23 Kansas State game. No, because 22 they also got 30 plus, but you've seen him really be able to make those adjustments against Colin Klein and be able to stop their offense really well. So just thought that was a little interesting tidbit.
Yeah, the only thing I would say in response to the Marcel Reed interceptions were I don't know that either of them were him forcing it versus him just not seeing it. The second interception in particular is him just not reading a flat defender because Kobe Black never works towards the deep out. And so he doesn't gain any width or anything. He's standing on the numbers, I'm pretty sure, when the ball is thrown. So that's one of those things where if you're Marcel Reed, you got to know who your flat defender is because that's the guy you're reading when you're throwing a sail concept the way they were. The interception, I do agree with you. You got to try to make a play, and it looks open when he throws it, and Taft makes a great play. So I do agree with you generally that in general, I don't blame quarterbacks for late game interceptions when they're down a lot because you do just have to hunt chunk plays. But I will say, I think those 2 picks were kind of just Marcel Reed interceptions. They're kind of what I've come to expect when I watch his tape. I expect him to make those types of mistakes pretty consistently.
Yeah, you made your point about the flat defender. I don't. I think when I watched back that play, because I watched it back multiple times, I don't think they had someone going the flats to take the corner. So it just seemed like they had the out and then the post.
Did they? I need to look at
Yeah.
it. But if that's then yeah, I mean, that's still one of those things where you're throwing the deep out. You kind of shouldn't have
Mhm.
that like, awareness,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's not a bad point you're making.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that they didn't have anyone in the flats at all to take one of the DBs. But anyways, I think we can move on now.
Yeah, so we already somewhat alluded to it, but Texas A&M is the 7th seed right now in terms of the rankings release. Ohio State is 1, obviously. Indiana is 2. Georgia is 3. Texas Tech is 4, Oregon is 5, 6 is Ole Miss, 7 is A&M, 8 is OU, 9 is Bama, 10 is Notre Dame, 11 I think is BYU, 12 is Miami, Texas is 13, Vanderbilt is 14, and then Utah is 15. We can just get it immediately out of the way. This pretty much confirms that Texas is out of the playoff race. They will not be in the playoff. Not only are they handicapped by A&M, but they needed to get to the 10 seed in order to be in the playoff because the ACC champion and the group of 5 champion are going to be the 11 and the 12 seed in the playoff. And so they're completely handicapped by Miami. And if BYU wins, it was going to be a moot point anyway because they were going to be in and Texas Tech was going to be in. So Texas is officially out of the playoff race. I don't think anyone was surprised. I don't think Clint and I are all that upset about it. I think we've said for a few weeks now that Texas isn't a playoff team and they don't deserve to be. They've looked good in a handful of games, but you can find about 6 games where Texas did not look like a top 12, let alone top 25 team. So I'm not mad about them not being in. I don't think they should be. And that's pretty much all I have to say about it with regards to Texas.
Yeah, I agree with you on most of those parts there. Obviously, you've had people making the argument about the top 10 games that we played going 3-2 against them, which I mean, I will say that is the one point that I will give them that we've had probably one of the toughest schedules in college football. And we've done, I mean, going over 500 against top 10 teams, that's really damn good to do no matter what team you are and who you play. But also, when you're evaluating who are college football playoff teams, which it's unfortunate that late in the season we finally started to catch somewhat of a stride, especially offensively, which has been our biggest problem all year. It's a full season picture that you're looking at. You can't just take the last couple games to where, yeah, we've maybe improved a bit and we've looked a lot better of a team. But that's also why you have that first half of the season, because you have to take into account those games. And you can see people making those arguments like, yeah, maybe we should just cancel the Ohio State game next year. Maybe we should just cancel all of our future non-conference powerhouses that we're going to play, which I get what they're saying, but I disagree with that because I think it helps you more than it does handicap you. Now, if Texas was 10-2, would they be getting in? Probably, maybe. I would agree with that. But also, if you're going to blame something, you have to blame the loss that you took to Florida. And at the bottom line, that's just what it is. I'm going to be in that camp, and I think any rational Texas fan will be in that camp that you can't go in and lose to a 3-9 Florida and expect to be able to get in with a 9-3 record. That's just not realistic to me. I don't think that's a realistic look in any people's eyes. I mean, I was honestly shocked today that we got in over Vandy, which did I think that we should be ranked over Vandy? I did personally, but that's a discussion for another day. But wasn't shocked that we didn't get in. And honestly, just watching Texas my whole life growing up with the horrible football that we had for a whole decade, I'm not really too disappointed that we still have a chance to get 10 wins in a season. So obviously a little disappointed that we didn't make the playoffs, but it's not the end of the world. And I think the fact that we have a chance at 10 wins and it's a down year shows how much the program has progressed over the years.
Yeah, I think that's a really good perspective to have, that Texas is 9-3 and they're going to get 10 wins. And if you said that 7 years ago, I think most Texas fans would be ecstatic. And if they told you, and if you told someone 7 years ago that it would be a down year and you were 10-3, I think most people would accept that. And so that's a testament to what Sarkisian is building at Texas. And you got an entire offseason to plan for if you're Texas. And we can talk about that in another episode. We'll probably get into that in the offseason, what the portal acquisition strategy will look like, what it'll look like from a developmental standpoint, what they need to do from a scheme standpoint. All of that will be addressed in the coming months, but there's a lot to look forward to if you're Texas. And I think the most important part was the strides that Arch Manning made. Clint, you and I talked about it pretty much the entire summer, that we thought 2026 was really the year for Texas. We thought that Texas in 25 was going to be fine, but we thought 2026 was the year for Texas because of what the defense was going to look like in terms of skill positions, what the defensive line was going to look like, the fact that it was going to be Arch Manning's second year, he was going to have more time under his belt. So it's a failure of a season, like McGower says, but when you evaluate in the context of it, and for me and Clint, I think we had both predicted Texas to go 10-2, and we didn't think they were going to win the national title this year. And quite frankly, we both thought next year was more important for Texas. So I think for us, we evaluate it differently, and there's obviously some positive you can take away from this season if you are Texas.
Yeah, I remember during the summer when we were on a couple of those shows with Ghost, previewing the season. We both, and I think even Ghost made the points that there would be growing pains with Arch. That no matter how good he is, how skilled he is, what his potential is, him being in his first full season as a starter, and especially it didn't help that his first ever start was at Ohio State.
Yeah.
I mean, that's throwing a kid right into fire, and it's very rare that you see any player in their first ever start as a full season quarterback being at Ohio State or at some powerhouse like that. So yeah, his strides he's made all season have been amazing. I think during the middle of the season, I didn't expect him to become this good at the end of the season, but you really started to see it, and it's unfortunate that it took this long for us to change it. But once you saw the offense change up and how Sark ran the offense, and it you started to see Arch really feel a lot more comfortable and our offensive line do a lot better. When we finally had Cole Hudson, Connor Robertson, everyone all healthy, and we made that switch to what we were calling for on the offseason, even early in the season, Connor Robertson and Cole Hudson, both at guard and center respectively, the offense moved a lot smoother. Even in that Georgia game where we only scored 10 points, it was moving smooth. It's just we just needed people to catch the ball. That's all it was. If we had receivers that could have caught the ball, the game could have been a lot different, and it would have looked a lot better on the stat sheet. But he's made a lot of great strides. I'm very excited for next year. Very confident in next year what we can do. And yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a failure of a season, but definitely disappointing a little bit.
Yeah. Um, I think we can move on then to a couple of these conference championships. This is my favorite time of the year, honestly. I love conference championship week. I think it's the best part of the season. Obviously, to me, it rivals opening weekend with all the different games when you're going from Saturday to Monday. But I really, really love conference championship weekend because it's the two best teams in every conference. It's a ton of fun to just watch the tape of those teams and figure out what they do well, what they don't do well, figure out how they can match up against each other, and then see kind of what it means for the postseason. I don't know if you feel the same way, Clint. I know a lot of people have a certain level of apathy because it means the college football season is ending. But for me, it's just so much fun to watch all these different conference championships. So we're going to start with the Big 12 championship, and that's going to be Utah versus BYU. I think they played,
BYU versus Texas Tech.
sorry, Texas Tech versus BYU. I was thinking Utah State, like the state of Utah, and Utah came up, but Texas Tech versus BYU. These two teams played about 3 weeks ago, I want to say. College game day was there, and Texas Tech drubbed BYU in Lubbock. This one will not be in Lubbock, but it will be, I believe, I think it'll be in the Cotton Bowl. Uh,
Jerry World.
yeah, Jerry World. Um, I don't really have many thoughts other than I think Tech's going to roll again. I don't know what BYU does from a front standpoint, from an offensive line standpoint, to be able to take away David Bailey and Romello Heights and Lee Hunter from absolutely wrecking the game the way they did in the first matchup. That was the story of the game. They could not block the Texas Tech front, and I don't know what changed in 3 weeks for me to have a different opinion. In fact, BYU, I don't think looked particularly impressive the last 2 weeks. I thought they should have lost to Kansas, if not for a pick six when Kansas was in the red zone, and then another terrible interception. BYU loses that football game. I don't think they were good against Cincinnati, but to me, this isn't a team that has inspired any confidence in me to think that they're going to win. You're right.
Yeah. So I agree with you on there with a lot of points. when BYU played Cincinnati, for example,
Yeah,
you saw
that's what I'm thinking
yeah,
of. My bad.
you saw Cincinnati miss 3 field goals, which could have been a huge difference later in that game on how they moved the offense, how they called the game. You saw really Cincinnati just shoot themselves in the foot that entire game. Any chance they had to take the lead, whether it was missing field goals, whether it was that Cyrus Allen fumble at the very end, you saw Cincinnati in multiple situations just completely throw the game away. Even against UCF, yeah, they won by 20, but for a good portion of that game, especially in the first half, BYU was not playing very great football at all. And Texas Tech, throughout this whole season, besides that Arizona State game, to be quite frank, they've just dominated every single team that they played. They have, there's no other way to really say it. They've given every team they've played belt. They won 49-0 against West Virginia. They beat UCF 48-9, which, granted, those two teams aren't necessarily great teams in the Big 12. But you just really see throughout the whole season that Texas Tech continues to improve and they continue to become a better team. Their defense hasn't taken any steps back. And I just don't see what BYU is going to do differently from the first game, like you said. I think that this game is going to be very similar. I think it'll probably be a very similar score margin. And in fact, I think Texas Tech could possibly win by more. I'm going to go with Texas Tech to win this game and not particularly close either.
Yeah. Just to correct myself, I was thinking of I think this was the Kansas Utah game, and I assumed it was Kansas versus BYU. At the time, I'm pretty sure I had split screen BYU versus UCF and Utah versus Kansas. Needless to say, BYU was not impressive in the UCF game. They were down 14 to nothing at one point. I think UCF threw a pick, and then BYU missed a field goal, and it took up until about the second quarter for BYU to do anything offensively, and it's not a very good UCF defense at all. They're one of the worst in the Power Four. So I'm with you, Clint. I think there's a real chance that Tech beats them by even more, especially when you consider the fact that Morton's only getting healthier. Um, he looked a lot better this past week. Now, obviously, they didn't play anyone good, but he does look healthier. He looks cleaner. He looks more mechanically sound. Um, so I'm with you. I think Tech's gonna roll. I would take them something like 35-6.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a similar score. Probably, honestly, like, even though BYU's defense has been all right, I'm going to go with like 41-13. I just
Yeah.
have no confidence in BYU to win this game.
Yeah, similar to how you have no confidence in BYU, I have no confidence in who I'm going to pick in this Ohio State Indiana game. This will be the number one team in the country versus the number two team in the country. It'll be Saturday at 7 p.m. Central Time on Fox. Um, this is a really, really interesting matchup to me because this will be by far and away the best offense that Ohio State has faced. And to me, that presents a lot of challenges for Ohio State because they really have not been tested. They haven't played an offense who can stretch the field. They haven't really played a wide receiver who's going to demand you potentially double them the way that Surratt is. And then they haven't played a quarterback who's playing as well as Fernando Mendoza. So it'll be an interesting challenge to see how they, one, navigate the run game of Indiana because Michigan early in that game had a ton of success running against Ohio State throughout the season on tape. I think there's been some signs that you can run on this Ohio State team. And so there's certainly an avenue for Indiana to win, but on the other side, Ohio State's offense has been super efficient. They've been really, really good in terms of taking care of the ball. And it makes it a really tough game to predict because you don't really know much about Ohio State outside of what they've done against some really bad opposition.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's kind of hard for me to pick this game. James Peoples didn't play at all last game, right?
No,
Is he hurt or something, or is it just they just
no, it's just one of those things where he's been cut out of the rotation. Now for Ohio State, it is Bo Jackson, the freshman, is their
and
running
CJ
back
Donaldson?
one. CJ Donaldson's their two, and then the West kid from San Antonio is the three.
James Peoples, I think, is the one from San Antonio.
Yeah, you're right. I think so. The
Yeah,
West kid's the third,
yeah.
though.
So, but yeah, Ohio State has not been tested at all. Other than that Texas game where Texas, I'm pretty sure outgained them by 200 yards. It's something around those numbers. That was a game where Texas just completely shot themselves in the foot offensively any chance that they got the opportunity to. That that was a game where, in all honesty, Ohio State should be 11-1. But I digress with that. The rest of the season, they have not been tested at all. I don't think Michigan was really a serious test. I think anytime Michigan played teams with a pulse, they have not been up to the challenge at all. They've lost every single one of those games against ranked teams, I'm pretty sure. Um, Ohio State, I mean, you could, if you want to be technical, they played a ranked team in Illinois midseason, but that Illinois team has been very disappointing throughout the whole season. After that Indiana game, they completely went downhill. Indiana also, respectively, other than that Oregon game, that was really their only test the whole season. I mean, they barely beat Iowa, barely beat Penn State, and even against Wisconsin for a good portion of that game, they were struggling offensively. I think Ohio State, just in terms of the weapons they have, just in terms of how they've been the whole season, in terms of the athletes that they have, I think that in my opinion, I think they're going to end up winning the championship again. I think that Indiana is going to have problems on offense, which you've seen little flashes of this year, even though that's been kind of what they've been able to do all year is be a really good offensive team. I think that Ohio State just has the better athletes. I think that Julian Sainz playing really good football, Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith, arguably the best wide receiver duo in the country. I think that Ohio State will come away with this win. I'm going to go with about a 31 to 27 game. I'm going to go somewhere around that, but I think it'll be a close game, and I have Ohio State winning it this year.
Yeah, I. This is a really tough one for me. I think Ohio State's going to win just because for now, until I'm proven wrong, I'm going to pick them. I think it'll be a close game. I think they're gonna end up pulling away late. I think they'll win by 10, but I think for most of the game it'll be really close. Give me Ohio State 24, Indiana 14. I think this will be a low scoring game. I think both defenses are going to have really good games. In particular, I think Bryant Haynes is going to have a monster day as a defensive coordinator for Indiana in terms of attacking this Ohio State protection scheme. It's not a super complex protection scheme. There are a lot of big on big and full slide stuff. They don't do a lot of different things with how they protect. And so this is a potential matchup where, like Oregon, where Bryant Haynes had a ton of simulated pressures and a lot of fire zones, and you saw him bring pressure from corners, you saw him bring pressure from safeties, you saw it from nickels and stars, and then you saw a lot of cross dogs. I think you could see something similar where it's a lot of pressures against Julian Sayin and a lot of simulated pressures that may cause a turnover too. And I think that's why it'll be really close because I think the Indiana defense is going to give some problems to Ohio State. But in these matchups, I tend to just pick who the more talented team is. And the more talented team is still Ohio State in this game. So, like you, I'll take Ohio State. And then, since I assume you're not going to add anything else, Clint, we can move on to the SEC championship game, which will be the last thing that we talk about here on the show today. This is Alabama versus Georgia. This will be a rematch of a game that was played in, I think, the last week of September. Um, you're right, we do. So we'll talk about one thing after this. We're going to talk about the coaching changes at the end of the show. But we'll first talk about Alabama versus Georgia. It was a game that happened in late September. Um, Georgia was at home, their first loss in I think 5 years at home. Alabama started off really fast. I think they were up double digits at the half. It might have been 24 to 14, and then they didn't score in the second half. And Georgia had a late 4th and 1 inside the 15 that they didn't convert on a sweep play or on a toss play, and then they never got the ball back. Um, I think it's a really interesting matchup just because these two teams to me have changed a lot in the past 2 months. They've done a lot of different things schematically, in particular defensively for both teams, and that makes it a really interesting matchup on both sides. I'll get into that a little bit more, but I want to hear your initial thoughts, Clint.
Yeah, so to be honest, this game isn't very hard for me to think to pick who I think is going to win. I think that throughout the past month or two, you've seen both these teams take a completely different trajectory. I think Alabama, even though they've been able to win these games, I think that they've been they lost to Oklahoma, but other than that, I think that Alabama as a whole, at least offensively, they've been going downhill for a good couple games now. I think that the team as a whole hasn't been playing as great as they were at the beginning of the year. I think Georgia, on the inverse, has just been they've been getting better every week, despite what the close score was against Georgia Tech. I just think that they've become a better team. I think that the offense is flowing a lot better. I think that the defense is playing better football, and I think overall, despite what we've had in the past with Kirby Smart having all his problems he does against Alabama, where I think his only win has been in that national championship game in 2021 against Alabama. I think that Georgia will win this game. I think that honestly, right now they're the better team. I think that Gunnar Stockton's been playing a lot better. I think that, like I said, that defense as a whole, especially that secondary, I think has gotten a lot better this year as the year's gone. And I just think that Ty Simpson, it's defensive coordinators have been able to figure him out recently on how to get pressure on him, how to make him create errant plays and make mistakes. So I'm going to go with Georgia in this game. I think that Georgia will win about a 27-17 game, and I think that Georgia could honestly be another team that makes it to the national championship with how they've played recently.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Funny enough, I told someone I was having a conversation with someone today, and I told them, I think for my national title pick, I'm going to take Georgia. The way that their defense has changed from the end of September, when a lot of their fans were super unhappy with Glenn Schumann, to now, where according to most advanced analytics, they're a top 10 defense, and some of them have them inside the top 8 and the top 5, has been really, really impressive. And it starts with their cornerback play. Dalen Everett's been awesome pretty much all year, but Alice Robinson has made a lot of strides. DeMello Jones has been fantastic for them. And I think in general, they've become more schematically complex since the end of September, where you've seen them start to play more of these traditional man heavy concepts. You see them play more cover one on first down. You'll see them play more two man on first down. You'll see them play a little bit more of the standard pass heavy concepts where early in the season on first down, you saw them run a lot of base quarters where it was pretty much just zone coverage and they were playing a lot of cover three and they were doing it from off alignments. You're not seeing that as much. They're a little bit more complex on first and second down. And then on third down, instead of just running the three deep, two under eyes pressures, you're now seeing some of their Big 12 pressures. You're seeing a lot of simulated pressures. You're seeing a lot of five-man, man-free pressures. You're seeing a lot of different things for them schematically to become more complex and throw more things at coordinators and quarterbacks. And I think that's going to be super important on Saturday against Ty Simpson because I don't think you can live being simple against him. I think he'll torch you. I think Ryan Grubb will torch you as well. To me, what I think you're going to see Georgia do, and this is because we've seen now LSU do this to them, we've seen OU do this to them, and we've seen Auburn do this to them. Teams that have had success against Ty Simpson in this Alabama offense are teams that have heavily pressured. OU blitzed on 50% of their snaps. LSU blitzed a ton. Auburn had a lot of success with different pressures. I think if you're Georgia, that's something that you have to look at and you really have to consider doing. Now, early in the game, they did try that against Alabama and it didn't work. So there is obviously some level of, well, if it didn't work the first time, why would it work the second time in terms of the thought process that you have to go through? But to me, I think that's the recipe to have success against this offense is you've got to force Simpson to make really tight window throws while he's being hit, and you've got to keep on hitting him. And you've got to trust your corners are going to be able to cover their wide receivers. Because if you try to play zone coverage and you drop 7 the entire game, Ty Simpson's too good, Ryan Grubb is too good. You're gonna really struggle. And then on the other side of the ball, one of the concerns that is going to arise for Georgia is the fact that Drew Bobo, their starting center, is dealing with a foot injury at the moment, and he is not expected to play on Saturday. And that's a really big deal for them because, one, he handles all of their protections. He's the one who sets it, he's the one who calls who the mic is. He does all of the different stuff for them in terms of getting them into the right play. So, without Drew Bobo, it makes you wonder a little bit what the offense is going to look like and what the run game is going to look like because Clint and I talked about it before the Florida show and we talked about it before the Georgia show. One of the things that Georgia has really struggled with this year is what happens when they can't run the ball. Now, Georgia averaged 4 yards per carry against Georgia Tech, but it was a lot of hit or miss stuff. It wasn't a consistent 5 yard gain, 6 yard gain, 7 yard gain. It was, we're going to hit them for 15, we're going to hit them for 8, we're going to hit them for 8, but now we're going to hit them for a -1. We're going to get a 0 yard gain here. It was a little bit of spitter and sputter, a little bit of spit and sputter. And if Alabama is able to stop the run and force Gunnar Stockton to throw into zone coverage and throw into tight windows and have to see the field, I think that's a distinct advantage for Alabama. Now, the question then is, can Alabama stop the run? And they haven't really been great at doing that this year. Georgia, the last time these two teams played, rushed for 230 yards. If Georgia does that again, they will win on Saturday. I do think Alabama is going to do a better job in terms of the run game, though. I do think they're going to have a better plan. I think they're going to be better against the run. I think Tim Smith being back is a really Tim Keenan and James Smith being available is a really, really big deal for them. I think they'll do a better job of murking the waters for the run game for Georgia. I don't think Georgia's run game is going to be completely stifled, but I don't think it's going to be what it was in the first matchup. And because it is because it is without Drew Bobo, I do have worries about the run game. I do have worries about the Georgia offense. So to me, this is going to be a really low scoring game. I'm going to take Alabama to win because I'm going to take Alabama to beat Georgia until Georgia beats Alabama. I know they beat them in the national championship, but outside of that, I think it's Alabama's 8-1 against Kirby Smart. And so when there's a trend like that, I'll continue taking Alabama until I'm proven wrong. And for that reason, I'll take Alabama in a really close game. I think it'll be low scoring, similar to the first matchup. I'll take Georgia to win, or I'll take Alabama to win 20-17.
Yeah. All right. You ready to get to coaching searches now?
Yeah, so we're going to first discuss the LSU job. They hired Lane Kiffin from Ole Miss. I think early in the process, this wasn't something that either you or I had really expected or thought was going to happen. You got to give LSU a lot of credit for one, getting a certain level of alignment needed, getting the boosters, getting the AD, getting Jeff Landry, getting all the different staffers and all the different people involved on the same page and getting them ready to create a really good pitch for Lane Kiffin, which they clearly did because they got him as their head coach. Um, it's a really good hire for LSU. It's probably the best hire that anyone made this cycle just because it's the biggest name and you assume he's going to be able to recruit. You assume he's going to understand what's needed at LSU, and because he knows what's needed at LSU, um, I think I think you can expect LSU to be really good. I don't know if they're going to win a national title. I don't know that any of that is going to happen, but I know they'll be pretty good.
Yeah. Overall, as a coach, I like Lane Kiffin. I think he's a great offensive mind when it comes to other college coaches. I think he's one of the top in the nation, top three in my opinion. I also think the other part of being a good coach, offensively at least, is how you manage games too. And I think he has a very good combination of those two, where you see him consistently as a coach have great offensive output in almost every game that he coaches in. Obviously, he'll have a few outliers no matter what as a coach, but he's a very good coach, in my opinion. He's going to be an upgrade from Brian Kelly. I think it was a slam dunk hire from LSU. I think that obviously, like you said, it was the best hire in the coaching search process, at least when in terms of name. We'll see how that turns out for them in a couple of years. But I think that LSU will be better. I don't think they're going to win a national championship, like you said. I don't see Lane Kiffin as a coach that will ever win one. That's just my honest opinion. Um, I don't know why it is, to be completely honest, why I feel that way. I just don't. And other than that, good coach. I think they need to honestly prepare themselves for the um, off the field attention that they're going to get in certain areas. But other than that, that's really all my thoughts when it comes to that.
Yeah, I do agree with Joshua here. You do need to win a national title, or else it's a failure for both sides. Because Lane Kiffin just left 11-1 Ole Miss for LSU, and who knows? Maybe they go on a miracle run and they win the national title this year. You may be passing that up for LSU. So if you don't win a title at LSU, it's an abject failure for him. And it's a failure for LSU. You're paying him $13 million, which is the most that anyone's currently being paid. Now Kirby Smart will get an extension soon that puts him above that, and so will Ryan Day. So he won't be the highest paid coach after that. But to pay him top three money, he needs to win a national title. If he doesn't, it's a failure. I don't know that I think he's going to win a national title. Um, I think there's a lot of things that he's going to have to prove, and one of those is not shitting the bed, or sorry, excuse my language, not not losing to teams you shouldn't lose to. Right? Kentucky last year, Florida last year. They could have lost to Kentucky this year. They were in a really close game with Florida this year. Um, they played Washington State really close at home. There's games that they just have no reason to lose, that he consistently loses or puts himself in position to lose. And until he stops doing that, I'm not buying him as a title contending coach, which we can then move on to our next coaching move, which was John Summerall to Florida, which I think could end up being the best hire that anyone made during the cycle. He is a psycho. He's really, really, and I mean psycho in a really positive way. He's one of those guys who's obsessed with the process. He understands what it means to win. He understands how to win, and those are super valuable. I think he's going to do a great job there. He's already hired Brad White as his defensive coordinator, who I think is a good hire. I don't know that I'd say it's a great hire. I think it's likely going to be Buster Faulkner for their offensive coordinator, and that's going to be one of the best hires in terms of a coordinator that anyone's made this cycle. So he's going to have a really good staff. And to me, Florida will, if John Summerall doesn't work, it won't be because of John Summerall. It'll be because Florida did not do a good enough job of giving him the support that he needed.
Yeah, I definitely think it was one of the better hires too. When you look at his resume and what he's done at each place he's been, at Troy, he won 2 conference championships. At Tulane, he's brought them to a conference championship. We'll see if they end up winning it. Is he going to be coaching for that game in the offseason? Okay.
Yep.
So they'll still have their coach. It still has a possibility to win that. Obviously, if they win that, the very off chance that they could compete for a natty, which I don't see it happening, but obviously anything's possible in college football. He's done a very good job of where he's been. I think Florida, he'll do a good job also. I think it'll be interesting to see who he brings on the staff in terms of coordinators and position coaches. But I think with the talent that you have there in Florida, the rich recruiting ground that you have in that, and also the neighboring states in Georgia and Alabama, I think that you're in a really good position if you're a head coach there. I think that if the Florida boosters can buy in, if they can give him the resources that he needs to become a successful head coach, I think that Florida could become a very scary program in the near future. They always seem like a ticking time bomb. They just need the right coach and the right people backing them, and they could be a very good program again, like they were under Urban Meyer, possibly.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. To steal the words of Bear Bryant, Florida is a sleeping giant, just because of the recruiting hotbed that they're in. So I think you nailed it on the head. Get the right get the right coach, and you'll figure it out at Florida. So then we can move on to our third job, which is going to be Ole Miss, who replaced Lane Kiffin with Pete Golding. I'm a massive Pete Golding guy. I think it's a really good hire. I think they're going to probably end up hiring Ron Roberts as their DC, and that's going to end up being one of the four best defensive staffs in totality in the SEC. And so to shift from a team that was really thought of as being offensive led to now being one of the best defensive teams in the SEC is going to be really fun to watch. For me in particular, I think it'll lead to more investment in the portal on the defensive side because the Ole Miss defense isn't terrible this year, but we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show. This isn't a good enough secondary to win a national title. The linebackers aren't consistently good enough, and they lack depth at D line. And those are things that, with a guy like Pete Golding at the helm, he's going to make sure that's not a problem for them. He's going to make sure that the defense is well equipped to win. He's going to make sure that there's enough depth there. He's going to make sure that that defense can sustain success. So I think it's a really good hire. And then I'm not sure what they're going to do on the offensive side of the ball. And similar to how Florida, a lot of the way that the job is perceived and a lot of the way the expectations is perceived is based around who the offensive coordinator hire is. I think the same can be said about Ole Miss, where I don't know who they're going to hire at offensive coordinator, but if they can get the right guy with the NIL investment that Ole Miss is going to give, Pete Golding, I think they could end up seeing themselves in the exact same position that they were in with Lane Kiffin, where I think they could be a 10-win team every year and have their moments where they're a title contender in certain seasons where, just like last year, how they should have been a title contender. You could see that more consistently with Pete Golding. So I think it's a really good hire. It's one that I think makes a lot of sense for them too. And I think it'll end up working out for them, even if it may seem like a panic hire in the moment.
Yeah, I think that for the situation they're put in, it's a good hire. Obviously, they never had a chance to really go through a coaching search as they're going into the college football playoff. And I mean, with the way that Lane left, I don't necessarily like the way he left. But honestly, you really don't have any other option in the sense if you're going to be leaving. Because from Ole Miss's perspective as an AD, why would you let a guy who already signed with LSU coach your team for another month and potentially try and lobby them to go with him to LSU? I mean, that you're kind of put in a tough situation there if you're an AD. But I think it was a good hire. I think Golding his whole career has done good everywhere he's been as defensive coach. Now, seeing him as a head coach, we'll see how he can do. Obviously, this is probably going to be the most. I don't know the word for it. It's going to be the most curious I am with how he ends up doing because you really don't have any base point to how he is as a head coach because I think this is his first head coaching job if I'm correct. Um, so being your first head coaching job, being an SEC school, that's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, he has the support of the players, but we see a lot of times that when you pick coaches, which I get this wasn't based off of players what they wanted, but when you pick coaches based off basis off panic and what players want, and usually does not end up good. I have a lot of faith in him, though I think he can do good. But I think throughout because he's going to be the head coach, obviously, for the playoffs. I think we'll see a little preview of how he can be as a head coach and how he can be as a game manager and just every sense of that. But for the situation they're put in, I think it was a good hire. I think making him the permanent was the right thing to do. I don't think you want to make him the interim and then have to, after the playoff, find another coach. So I think it was good to just get their coach in place now, have some continuity before early signing day. And yeah, I'm just very curious to see how this one goes because this is probably the most questionable I am about any hire.
Yeah, I think it's fair to have the most questions about this hire just because of the way the process went down for them, where there's only so much you can do when you're being told by Lane Kiffin that he's going to stay, right? You're not going to be able to get a guy like John Summerall or a guy like Alex Golish to take the job, and so I think they did the best with what they could, and it's an interesting hire to see how it goes forward. Speaking of Alex Golish, he took the Auburn job. He's keeping DJ Durkin. That came out today. I think it's a good hire. I think it'll be interesting to see how the wide choice system works at Auburn, and whether or not it'll lead to better offenses because really that is kind of the thing with Auburn, where it feels like if they would have just had competent quarterback play and competent offense this year, they would have won something like 8 or 9 games. So if Alex Golish can do that for Auburn, I think this could end up being a really good hire.
Yeah, obviously we've seen what he's been able to do at South Florida. He's done a really good job throughout his whole tenure there. The past couple of seasons, maybe they didn't have that great of a record, but for what he's been able to do ever since the last head coach, I can't remember who it was before him, but I know that they were in a pretty bad spot with their last head coach. Um, I like what he does. You can see little flashes of what he's able to do as a head coach from what he did at Florida this year, which Florida didn't end up being great, but being a G5 school who the kids you're going to get, you're nowhere near the talent of a school like Florida, who's arguably one of the flagships in their state. Um, I think he'll do good there. I think at Auburn, just like all these other hirings, you're going to need to have the right backing no matter what, especially with NIL nowadays. But I think that him as a coach, he's great. I think that Auburn will do good. I think it's one of the better coaching hires. Also, I think all these coaching hires in general were good, especially for the program and what these expectations are for these programs. So I think it's gonna be real fun next year to see how all these first year coaches end up doing. Alex Kolsch was a guy that I thought should be a big candidate for a coaching job this year in the Power Five. Whether it was at first when Mike Gundy got fired, I thought maybe he'd be good for Oklahoma State, but Eric Morris ended up taking that. But I think Auburn hiring him was a great hire. Obviously, for a while, I thought Summerall was going to be the guy, but that didn't end up turning out. So Alex Golish, I think, is right up there with John Summerall as one of the better coaching candidates, and I think that they made a really good hire there.
Yeah, I agree. So we can move on to, I think we're on our last hire now, and that's going to be this Arkansas job. They hired Ryan Silverfield from Memphis. Funny enough, Memphis actually beat Arkansas in the regular season this year. Memphis at one point looked like they were going to be the group of five bid for the conference for the college football playoff. They ended the year really poorly, lost their last 3 games, but I think this is a good hire. One, because I think the big thing for me with anyone who takes the Arkansas job is they just need to be able to get the boosters on their side. If you can get the boosters on your side at Arkansas, because the boosters there are extremely rich, right? It's the Walmarts, it's the Tyson guys, and it's
Jerry Jones.
oh, yeah, the boosters there are absurdly rich. So if you can get them to commit to football, you can be something like Texas Tech. And so, one, it's getting NIL on board, and then it's making sure that you understand how to keep everything aligned. And I think Silverfield knows how to do that, because if you go and read what happened this offseason at Memphis, he got a ton of money for that football program, and he got a massive influx of cash for the NIL department. So that to me is a sign that he knows what it's going to be like from an NIL perspective. He's got a good plan for NIL. And for that reason, I think it's a good hire, even if the season that he had this year, and especially the end of it, was as disappointing as it was.
Yeah, I think immediately after the hire, you saw a lot of fans protesting, and I kind of get their anger from a certain point because they were one of the early vacancies in college football in terms of Power Four. You saw them have possibilities at which I don't know how much of possibility they were. You had all the different candidates with James Franklin to Alex Golish to John Summerall, all these guys that they were trying to get, but just couldn't end up getting any of them. Got Ryan Silverfield, and you kind of saw the fans do what A&M did when initially they hired Mark Stoops, which is trying to protest the hire. But I think that it was a good hire overall. I think Ryan Silverfield's done good at Memphis. Even though, like you said, the ending of this year hasn't been great. I'm pretty sure he has 2 10-win seasons there, if I'm correct. Something along those lines. But he's done a really good job there. And as you said, the NIL backing, what he's been able to do, which I think is one of the biggest things that Arkansas needs, because under Sam Pittman, they did not have a great NIL backing. The boosters did not want to pony up money for Sam Pittman, who they thought wasn't going to be the answer really at head coach. And if you're able to do that good at a school like Memphis, which they're a G5, and in my opinion, from how I view it, they're more of a basketball school than a football school. Um, that's a really good thing that you can have as a head coach, especially nowadays, because coaching isn't just X's and O's. It's a lot more than that nowadays with the NIL, with having to recruit kids constantly, which I think is what a lot of people forget about. I think he's also a great recruiter too. So I think that Arkansas got themselves a good coach, and you're going to need a great recruiter too when the state you're in, it's not a great pool when it comes to talent, and you're surrounded by the state of Tennessee, which obviously Tennessee is going to be going for those guys in like the Nashville area. You got the state of Texas and the DFW area, which you're competing with A&M, Texas, and Oklahoma for. So you don't really have any great recruiting grounds where you have the immediate advantage. So I think Brian Silverfield is going to be a good coach for them, and I think for the expectations that Arkansas has in general as a football program, I think it was a perfect hire.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have anything else to say. So we've now hit the hour mark. I don't think you or I expected that because we didn't have a lot of topics on the show today, but we had a really,
Yeah.
really long last 2 weeks in terms of all the different stuff that happened in the college football world. And um, sometimes that happens when the coaching carousel is as crazy as it was. And then you have some of the big games that we had this week and next week. So it's a really exciting time for college football. Like, subscribe, comment, retweet, follow Ghost on Twitter, follow Total Coverage on Twitter and on YouTube. Follow Clint at NBA Hornboy. Follow me at Pat Talks XO, and